As we were planning our broadcast this morning on religion and politics in America, one of the first people we went to was the Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York. As you're going to see, it was a lively conversation.
A blessed Easter and a happy Passover.
Let me just start with this. How would you define the state of religion in America today?
Good. I think religion is vibrant. It's growing. The stats show us, as you can imagine, I'm particularly attentive to what the data shows us about the Catholic faith in the United States. The numbers are up. The commitment of the people is strong. That doesn't mean, Bob, that we don't have a lot of problems. We do, and we bishops, as any other pastor, have to treat those problems realistically. So we do have people leaving, we do have people disenchanted, but in general it's good news.
How would you rate the state of the Catholic Church right now? You've been through some really tough times with some of the recent scandals.
But yeah, we have. The last 10, 12 years have been very tough for the Catholic Church. With the eyes of faith, though, we always know that difficulties can purify us and strengthen us. And we're seeing that. For instance, we got a slight increase in vocations to the priesthood. And the young men coming in will say, you know, it's really the tough times, it's really the scandals that almost inspired my vocation, because I saw the need for virtuous, hardworking priests and a Catholic Church that's reinvigorated, and I want to be part of that renewal. So God can always bring good out of bad, and I think that's what we're seeing in the church.
I want to talk a little politics with you, Your Eminence. Back in 1960, when John Kennedy became the first Catholic president, he made a speech during the campaign because he said flatly he wanted people to know, and he wanted to assure them that he thought there was a separation between church and state. Here's the way he put it.
I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote.
Now, people in both parties have referred back to that over the years as a good definition of church and state, but during this campaign year, one of the Republican candidates, Rick Santorum, said this about it.
I had the opportunity to read the speech, and I almost threw up. You should read the speech. In my opinion, it was the beginning of the secular movement of politicians to separate their faith from the public square. And he threw faith under the bus in that speech.
Your Eminence, where do you think the line should be between church and state? Should there be a separation?
You bet there should. You bet there should. That's good. That separation between church and state is good not only for the United States, it's also good for the church. I'd find myself, and give me a second to explain this, Bob, I'd find myself, believe it or not, agreeing with both of them. I would cheer what John Kennedy said. He was right. And I would found myself among those applauding that speech. That having been said, I would also say that Senator Santorum had a good point, because unfortunately what John Kennedy said in September of 1960 to the Baptist Ministerial Alliance in Texas has been misinterpreted to mean that a separation of church and state also means a cleavage, a wall between one's faith and one's political decisions, between one's moral focus and between the way one might act in the political sphere. I don't think John Kennedy meant that, and as you know, recent scholarship has shown that John Kennedy was very inspired by vision, by character, by virtue. Let's call that faith. Let's call that morals. So I don't think John Kennedy meant a cleavage between faith and politics. He did mean a wall between state and church, and I'd applaud that one. But I'd agree with Senator Santorum that unfortunately that's been misrepresented to mean that faith has no place in the public square. That, I would, with Senator Santorum, say is a misinterpretation, not only what Senator Kennedy meant, but with what the American genius is all about.
Do you think there's too much religion in politics today?
No, I don't think so at all. I think politics, just like business, just like education, just like arts, just like culture, only benefits when religion, when morals, when faith has a place there. I think the public square in the United States is always enriched whenever people approach it, when they're inspired by their deepest held convictions. And on the other hand, Bob, I think the public square is impoverished when people might be coerced to put a piece of duct tape over their mouth, keeping them from bringing their deepest held convictions to the conversation.
Well, there was certainly no duct tape on your mouth when the president came out and let it be known that his health care plan included Catholic institutions having to buy birth control pills for their employees at in churches and in schools and in hospitals. I want to ask you about that because I interviewed the vice president last week and he told me that it had all been resolved. Here's what he said.
On the substance, the president ended up exactly where he intended and where he began, which was that, one, every woman in America should be able to have insurance coverage for birth control if she so chooses, and that the Catholic Church and other churches should not have to pay for it or provide it. That's exactly where we ended up.
For the record, is that what you advised the president?
Yes, but that's also where the president was in the front end.
So I guess a question I'd ask you, Your Eminence, are you good with that?
No, although I appreciate very much the Vice President. He's been helpful, and I have benefited from his counsel, and I look forward to talking to him again, so I'm glad he weighed in on it. But I would disagree with him. It hasn't helped us much, Bob, because we still have to pay for it, because most of us are self-insured, and we're still worried not just about our institutions, but also the individuals. So we still find ourselves in a very tough spot, and we're still going to continue to express what we believe is just not a religious point of view, but a constitutional point of view, that America is at her best when the government doesn't force a citizen or a group of citizens in a religious creed to violate their deepest held moral convictions.
Do you agree with what the Vice President seemed to be saying, that the President really didn't change his position?
Yes, I think so. Although I'm a little confused because the President told me his position, his conviction, is that the government would do nothing to impede religion, and he was very gracious in especially complimenting the Catholic family in the United States in their work for health care, charity, and education. And he'd say, I don't want this administration to do anything to impede that. It's tough for me to see how these strangling HHS regulations do anything but that.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever worry that sometimes, do you have to be careful about getting too involved in politics? I notice there's a new Pew poll out that says 60% of Catholics say that churches and other houses of worship should just totally steer clear of politics.
Yeah, I do worry about that, Bob. And this is a good place for me to remind everybody, we didn't ask for this fight. I don't enjoy it at all. I wish I was on here, Face the Nation, answering other questions, and you probably do too. We didn't ask for the fight, but we're not going to back away from it. What I'd say is this: yeah, I don't think religion should be too involved in politics, but I also don't think the government and politics should be overly involved in the church. And that's our problem here. You've got a dramatic, radical intrusion of a government bureaucracy into the internal life of the church. That bothers me. So hear me say, hey, I'd like to back away from this. I got other things to worry about and bigger fish to fry than this. Our problem is the government is intruding into the life of faith and in the church that they shouldn't be doing. That's our read on this.
Your Eminence, this is bound to come up in the campaign. Do you think Catholics would have a problem with a Mormon president because Mitt Romney is a Mormon?
I hope not. No, we've been through that. A couple months ago, Bob, Abe Foxman at the Jewish Anti-Defamation League was kind enough to invite me to address their annual meeting, and I was honored to. And he said, tell us a couple ways that maybe the Jewish community and the Catholic community could cooperate better in the United States. And I brought this issue up. I said, listen, everybody, we Catholics and we Jews have felt the sting of the other side. And now one of the ways we can cooperate is to see that religious prejudice, religious bigotry doesn't enter the campaign.
I said, there may be reasons not to vote for Mitt Romney as President of the United States. That he's a Mormon cannot be one of them. And the Jewish community stood up and gave a standing ovation. I don't think Catholics would have any problem voting for a Mormon at all.
One final question. What is your greatest challenge now as a Catholic leader?
The greatest challenge is to, in a way, it's the same as it was that first Easter Sunday morning, to try to show that God, religion, the church is on the side of life and light and freedom and hope. That's the biggest challenge, to that life-giving, liberating, ennobling, uplifting message of the Bible, of morality, of the church, of Jesus. That's our challenge, Bob. And in a world, I mean, you're on the front lines. You got to report bad news all the time. Most of the time we want to cry when we see the news because there's so much darkness and tragedy and sadness. So the greatest challenge I got is try to preach the good news and try to show that the light and life and promise of the gospel always trumps the bad news that we hear all the time. There's the great religious challenge.
Your Eminence, it is a pleasure to talk to you this morning. And
Thank
happy
you,
Easter.
Bob. Happy Easter. Happy Easter to you and our audience today.
Thank you, sir.